Good morning to all of you. I feel you are kindred spirits because I know this is a group ng mga Laiko. Ang inyong lingkod din po ay medyo aktibo sa aming parokya sa St. Therese Diocesan Shrine na po kami. Itong simbahan sa UP Los Baños, ako po ay katatapos lang ng 3 taong termino bilang Grand Knight ng Knights of Columbus Council namin dito. At ako rin po ang hinirang na aming parish priest na the treasurer ng aming Parish Finance Council. Kaya ako po din ay malimit sa simbahan ngayon. Anyway, I'm pleased to have been honored to share my own perspectives on how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted on our socio-economic landscape, on Filipinos' lives. And so let me put on my screen right now for my slides. I understand I have about an hour to make this presentation. So that means I can afford to be a bit more expansive. Pwede akong magkwento ng mga anecdotes sa aking mga slides para naman maging mas lively yung ating pag-uusap. So I call it Healing COVID-19's Deep Scars. And I talk about 2 wheels on an obstacle course as we try to achieve our economic recovery. Ito po ang aking general outline. Where have we been is the first general question. So ano nang naging sitwasyon natin, lalo na sumapit sa atin itong pandemya. And then where are we headed? Ano yung mga good news and bad news na nakikita natin? At ano ang kailangan din siguro natin gawin upang tuluyan sanang makabangon na tayo dito sa problema na ito. So let me start with where have we been? And I call it a painful recession because it's a recession that is still with us, contrary to what people think, simply because of the statistics that came out for the second quarter. Ako po, sa lahat ng aking economic briefing, simula siguro halos nung ako'y umalis sa gobyerno, 1998 pa, meron po akong tinatawag na pitik test. Pitik dahil siguro marami sa inyo gumagawa ng ganon. Kasi ito po ay pag-honor ko rin sa aking late father na siya ang tagapamalengke sa bahay namin. Mahilig siya ang bumili ng mga prutas, lalo na. Tapos alam niyo po, di ba, pinipitik natin kuminsan yung melon, pakwan, buko even. Ang nalalaman kung hinog o hindi. In short, it's a quick and reliable test. Pero bakit pitik sa ekonomiya? Kasi kung ako'y pinuno ng NEDA noong 1990s, tuwing ako'y nagtatalumpati ito po sa ekonomiya, humihikab po yung mga audience ko. Pag ang mga pinag-uusapan ko na ay mga fiscal deficit at balance of payments at kung ano na pa mga financial indicators. Pero pag presyo, P, trabaho, T, at kita, K, ay all ears po kasi doon tayo nakaka-relate lahat. In fact, sabi nga ng social weather station sa lahat ng survey nila, ang pinaka-importante na variable sa ating mga mamamayan, pag sinabing ano ang top economic issue, lagi pong presyo ang lumalabas sa kanilang survey. Over the years, consistently, yan sinasabi ni Mahar Mangahas ng SWS. So ano nga po ba ang ating naging performance natin? Well, balikan ko po muna yung presyo lang. Price increases are again picking up. So pataas ang inflation rate natin kasi nung pong 2019-2020, nag-average lang po tayo ng 2.5 at 2.6% for the whole year. Ang ibig sabihin po niyan, sa bawat 100 pisong ginastos natin ng isang taon, ngayong taon na ito, kung 2.6 ang inflation, 102 pesos and 60 centavos na. So tumaas. Pero tingin nyo, bahagya yun, di ba? 2 piso, 260 sa bawat 100 piso. That is actually a very good rate of inflation. Medyo stable ang presyo, ibig sabihin. Kasi po, ibahagi ko lang sa inyo, noong 1990, nung una akong pumasok sa gobyerno bilang Assistant Secretary sa NEDA, panahon po ni President Cory Aquino, ang ating pong inflation rate noon, 19%. So sa bawat 100 pisong ginastos nyo ng isang taon, ngayon 119 na. So medyo mataas po na pagtaas ng presyo yon. So even the 4.5 that we're seeing right now is essentially manageable kasi that only means 104 pesos and 50 centavos ikumpara dun sa last year. No? Kaya lang, ang matindi po yung pagkain. Kasi ang inflation rate sa pagkain, lalong-lalong sa karne, umaabot ng 26%. So, mabuti na lang at karamihan ng ibang mga produkto sa ekonomiya, mas mababa ang inflation rate. Kaya nag-average tayong 4.5. So ito po naman yung trabaho, yung ating T sa pitik. Ang unemployment natin medyo mataas pa rin. Naglalaro na po tayo ng 5% lamang before the pandemic hit. No? But now, it is hovering around 7 to 8%. So mas mataas pa rin po yan. In fact, nag-average siya ng 10.7%. So 1 out of 10 of our workers, of our labor force, did not have a job last year. So ngayon, it's a little less than 1 out of 10, pero mas mataas pa rin po kaysa sa 5% na nakikita na natin bago tayo tinamaan ng pandemya. So ito po yung latest numbers kasi month by month. Ano? Kita nyo parang hindi pa rin mas stable kasi tumataas, bumababa, tumataas. Depende po kasi sa lockdown, no? Kung gaano katindi yung lockdown. Alam naman natin, itong mga nakaraang buwan, pabalik-balik tayo sa ECQ at MECQ at GCQ at bumabalik ulit sa ECQ na naman. So kaya po nagkaganyan. No? July, naging 6.9% na lang. Yun ang pinakamababa nakita natin so far sa taon na ito. Pero andun pa rin po na umakyat na naman ng 8.1 noong August. Puntahan po natin yung K, yung kita. Ang pangsukat po niyan, yung GDP, Gross Domestic Product. And yung Gross Domestic Product natin, sinusukat niyan output on one hand, but also income on the other. Kasi po, yun namang halaga ng ating produksyon, katumbas po yan ng halaga ng mga income na binayad sa lahat ng factors of production, sa labor, sa capital, sa interest na binayad sa mga utang, etc. Kaya po, these are two sides of the same coin. But anyway, we all know the news that nag-negative 17 no, last year. Ano? Samantalang buong taon, umabot siya ng, I think it was negative 9.6, no? Parang negative 10, yung buong taon 2020. Ngayon, alam natin, nung first quarter, first 3 months of this year, naging negative 4.3 siya. So, ibig sabihin, pababa pa rin ang takbo ng ekonomiya natin. Pero nitong pangalawang quarter, ang naiulat po sa atin, 11.8%. Mukhang maganda, no? Kasi double digit. Pero ipapaliwanag ko po sa inyo na medyo misleading po yung report na yon sapagkat ang katunayan, bumaba ang ating produksyon, ang ating mga kita between the first 3 months of the year and the second 3 months of the year. Kasi yung quarter-on-quarter growth ay negative 1.3. So let me explain that to you a little more later on. Tingnan mo po natin yung graph ng presyo o yung inflation rate, yung pong porsyento ng pagtaas ng presyo. So ito po yung nakikita natin. Noong 2018, mataas din po ang ating naging average inflation, 5.2%. Pero nabanggit ko na kanina, 2019, 2020, 2.5 at saka 2.6%. But as you can see the red line, ang trending po niya pataas. No? And actually, iisa ho ang dahilan niyan sa ngayon. Yung pong presyo ng karne, dahil na nga po sa karneng baboy, tinamaan tayo ng African swine fever, kaya tumindi ang pagtaas ng presyo ng karne, lalo na ng baboy. Pero pag tumaas po halimbawa kasi ang baboy, nahahawa po dyan yung ibang karne kasi sila yung mga substitute na tumataas ang demand para sa kanila dahil po konti nga ang available na baboy, nahahawa. Tapos pag nagtagal po yan, nahahawa yung buong ekonomiya sa pagtaas ng presyo. So yan po ang kinatatakot ng ating mga otoridad. But meanwhile, ito po ang trajectory ng presyo natin. Ngayon, sa trabaho naman po, ito yung more detailed figures. Hindi ko na pagtatagalin yung pag-interpret nito, pero tingnan na lang natin yung average for 2021 so far. No? Hanggang Agosto pa lang po yung datos natin na binibigay ng gobyerno. Pero ang isa pang interesting dito, bukod na pinakita ko na kanina yung mga unemployment rate, buwan-buwan. Ngayon naman, yung number of jobs generated compared to 1 year ago. Yun po yung mga nasa sa column, no? ng iba-ibang numero dyan. So kung titignan ko yung average for the year, January to August, ang average new jobs created over 1 year ago was about 427,000. kulang pa ng kalahating milyon. Pero ang isipin po natin, sa bawat taon, may mga 1,000,000 na karagdagang 15-year-olds na dumadagdag sa ating populasyon. Ang working age population po sa Pilipinas, 15 years old. Hindi naman lahat yon nagiging labor force kasi hindi lahat yon gustong magtrabaho, no? Sapagkat nag-aaral pa ang karamihan. So the labor force is different from the working age population. Pero yung pong unemployment rate natin, kinukuha yung porsyento na yon doon sa labor force. Yung talagang naghahanap ng trabaho o may trabaho na. Now, as I said, if about 1 million new 15-year-olds join us every year, sabihin na natin conservatively, mga 2/3 lang nun ang naghahanap ng trabaho. Still, kailangan natin ng higit do sa 427,000 na nakikita natin dyan. Nakaragdagan trabaho. So, sabihin, mas dumami pa rin yung walang trabaho kahit na gusto magtrabaho. Mapapansin natin ang mga mas maganda, halos pare-pareho ang average nila, 150,000 sa agriculture, 110 sa industry, 166 sa services. Tapos yung tinatawag natin underemployment rate, yung mga nagtatrabaho pero sa kanilang pakiramdam kulang yung kanilang trabaho dahil kulang ang kinikita, siguro para mabili yung kanilang basic needs. No, si Mahal Mangahas po, nabanggit ko na yung social weather stations, sinusukat din nila ang unemployment pero iba ang paraan nila. Tinatanong nila yung mga tao, kayo ba'y may trabaho o wala? Alam niyo po ang pagkakaiba kasi itong galing sa Philippine Statistics Authority, kung kayo ay nakapagtrabaho ng kahit 1 oras lang sa nakaraang linggo, considered na kayo na employed. At kung tutusin natin, hindi ibig sabihin na kayo may trabaho, lalo na wala kayong regular na trabaho. No? Pero pag sumagot ka ng, yes, I work at least 1 hour in the past week, you will actually be marked as employed. Yung kay Mahal Mangahas, ang tanong lang sa tao, simple, ikaw ba may trabaho o wala? Pag sinabing wala, makakount sila. Tingnan niyo po yung porsyento, 27.6. Mahigit sa isa sa bawat 4 ng manggagawang Pilipino ay walang trabaho according to the last survey noong June ng social weather stations. So ang nangyayari po nito, yung sa social weather stations, sabi ni Mahal, ang paliwanag niya, ang interpretasyon natin dyan, kung titingnan natin sa PSA, i-add niyo po yung underemployment at saka yung employment, yung unemployment. Yun po yung halos nakikita ng social weather stations. In fact, mas higit pa. Kung isusuma natin itong dalawa, mga 24 lamang. Pero ang nasukat po ng social weather stations, halos 28%. So this is just to show you na matindi ang kawalan ng hanap buhay, ang kawalan ng trabaho. And therefore, alam natin at titindi ang kahirapan sa ating ekonomiya dahil nga sa nangyaring pandemya. Now, tingnan po natin yung kita. No? Ito po ang isang magandang masasabi ko sa ating GDP. No? Ang ating pong agriculture sector ay pinakamatibay sa paglaban sa pandemya. Bakit po? Tingnan natin, yung pinakamatindi ang lockdown nung 2nd quarter at saka 3rd quarter last year. Yung the rest of the economy, double-digit negative. No? Talagang nag-dive. Samantalang ang agrikultura, lumago pa. Although bahagya, 1.6%, 1.2%. At alam niyo po, kaya lang po naging negative yung 1st quarter at saka yung final quarter dahil sa mga bagay naman na hindi natin kontrolado. Sa 1st quarter po yung Taal Volcano pumutok, no? Kaya yung Calabarzon, which is one of the biggest agricultural areas of the country, maraming crop production na naapektuhan. Noon naman pong last quarter, yung October to December last year, diyan po tumama yung sunod-sunod na bagyo, yung Rolly at Ulysses at iba pa, na nakapinsala din po ng maraming agricultural areas. If not for those, I am sure that our agricultural sector would have performed positively. In fact, as I said here, no, natural calamities dampened the 1st and 4th quarters. Tapos nito pong first 2 quarters ng taong ito, kaya lang po negative yan, dahil nga doon sa African swine fever na pinatay po ang halos 1/3 ng ating swine population. Maaring underestimate pa po yun kasi maraming hindi nire-report no, na African swine fever na namatay. No? So in short, what I'm trying to say here is agriculture is the most resilient sector of our economy. At dapat po talaga natin, in fact, nasabi ko na sa aking column na ito ang dapat natin i-consider na backbone ng ating ekonomiya. Napakahalaga po ng agrikultura, kailangan ng ating mga magsasaka ng talagang utmost support. support to improve their productivity and improve our competitiveness in agriculture. Now, let me go on. No? Gusto kong paliwanag po sa inyo kung bakit nakaka-mislead yung 11.8 na nakita natin itong last quarter. Ang sinukat po nun ay yung difference between the second quarter GDP level at saka yung second quarter last year, na yun po yung talagang lumubog ng pagkalalim dahil nga sa absolute lockdown tayo ng second quarter. Yun po yung 11.8% difference na iulat. Kasi po ang graph na ito, paliwanag ko muna, yan po mismo yung level of GDP measured in constant prices. Ang ginagamit po nating base year is 2018 prices. Kaya po ginagawa yan para mawala yung epekto ng inflation sa pagtaas ng number na yun. Kasi misleading naman, nasabihin natin lumago ang ekonomiya dahil tumaas yung amount. Pero dahil kumisan kaya lang pala nangyari dahil tumaas ang presyo. So alisin natin yung effect ng presyo. We express it in constant prices. Tapos meron din pong seasonality ang ating produksyon. So meron pong paraan ng mga statistician na i-adjust yung numero para maalis yung seasonality factor. So when you adjust for seasonality, use constant prices, and then annualize it, then yun ang makukuha nyo na GDP growth rate in annual basis. Tayo po ginagamit natin yung year on year. So ang dahilan po dyan is yun ang siguro the lazy way of removing seasonality. Ikumpara mo na lang sa same period last year. So walang seasonality effect. Pero sa ibang bansa po kasi, ang pag-report nila ng GDP growth, quarter to quarter, tapos i-annualize nila. Let me show you the difference it makes. Kung titignan po natin yung graph natin, negative 1.3 po talaga. Kasi actually bumaba po ekonomiya natin kumpara sa first quarter ng taon na ito. Hindi po tumaas. So, masasabi natin sa graph na ito na nagkaroon tayo ng recession o pagbaba ng produksyon at kita ng mga tao nung first and second quarter ng isang taon, pero bumangon na po tayo sa recession nung third quarter last year pa. So, dahil tumaas na po, naging pataas na po uli siya. Kaya lang, kung ikukumpara nga naman yung Q3, ito po, tuturo ko kung nakikita niyo yung pointer ko. Kung ikukumpara niyo yan sa Q3 ng isang taon, mas mababa nga naman, kaya negative yung naiulat. Pero sa totoo lang po, paangat na ang ekonomiya natin noon. Hanggang itong first 3 months nitong 2021. Kaya lang, bumaba na naman. Dahil po tumindi na naman ang COVID, nagka-Delta variant, di ba? So, yung pong mga nag-celebrate na wala na daw recession dahil 11.8 na, medyo nagkakamali po sila. Sapagkat actually bumaba ang ekonomiya natin yung second quarter. Ito po nangyari. If you annualize that, dapat po ito naiulat sa mga dyaryo. At sa Amerika, sa Japan, Australia, kung saan quarter on quarter annualize ang nire-report nila, this would have been the number that in the newspaper headlines, not positive 11.8. At dyan po nila binabasa kung recession o hindi ang ekonomiya. So I'm sorry I belabored this, but I just wanted you to see that sometimes yung statistics natin can be misleading dahil po abnormal yung sitwasyon natin. Let me move on this. No? Ito naman po yung demand side, yung spending side of the economy. Kasi kaya naman po nagkakaproduksyon dahil merong bumibili ng mga produkto natin at mga serbisyo din. So one important factor was that nagkaroon tayo ng negative 7.9 pagbaba ng household consumption. Yung pong gastos ng mga taong bayan, no? Ay bumaba ng almost 8%. Napaka-abnormal po niyan kasi sa karaniwang panahon, tumataas po yan taon-taon by 5 to 6%. Ngayon, it seems good news na nag 7.2 na po positive noong second quarter. Pero papakita ko po uli sa inyo na medyo misleading kasi mas mababa rin po yan kaysa sa last quarter.
Pati mga COVID cases natin din na.
Anyway, tingnan po natin yung government consumption. Yan po yung ginagastos ng gobyerno, whether sa mga sweldo ng mga empleyado, sa mga office supplies. Ang hindi lang po kasama dyan yung infrastructure. Kasi yung infrastructure nakakasama dito sa fixed capital formation. Kasi po yung construction, naka-disaggregate yan into government, corporations, and households construction. Doon po natin makikita na okay, malaki yung tinaas ng government construction dahil nga po doon sila bumabawi. Kasi nga po nakakalungkot yung construction investment activity ng private sector bumaba pa rin, no? Negative 27.7. Pero ang nakakabahala dito, parang bumaba yung mga ayuda, etc. Kasi tingnan niyo po, negative 4.9 yung pangalawang linya, government consumption. Kung kailangan pa rin ng ayuda, diyan po bumaba na. In fact, yung mga bayanihan 2 and 3, mas maliit na po yung ayuda diyan eh. Hindi tulad nung 8,000 pesos na binigay nung isang taon. Kaya nga po nung isang taon, tingnan nyo, 21.8 nung second quarter, yung percentage ng pagtaas ng government spending on consumption purposes. Ngayon, sa pang magandang balita, yung exports and imports natin, tumaas na rin po, double digit na rin ang pagtaas. Now, ito yung sinasabi ko sa consumption. Sabi po nung consumption, 7% ang pagtaas. Ito po kasi yon. Compared to the very abnormal decline last year, mas mataas nga naman by 7.2%. Pero sa graph na lang na ito po, makikita nyo na malalim yung pagbaba na naman mula nung January to March. No? In fact, if i-annualize natin yon, negative 2.4 po kasi yon, quarter to quarter, 9.95% negative po yung pagbaba ng paggastos ng taong bayan. So sabihin, walang pera sa bulsa, walang magastos, kaya ang laki na ibinaba ng mga ginagastos. No? So this is the situation that the ordinary Filipino household is in right now. Ito po, month by month, pakikita ko lang sa inyo in a bird's eye view. Ang magandang balita siguro po nitong mga nakaraang buwan, ang manufacturing, teka, ano nangyari at nawala? Dali lang po. Ibabalik ko yung aking slide. Yan. Ito po ang makikita nyo. Tingnan mo nyo itong July. 537.9% increase. Of course, year on year na naman po yan. Medyo mababa kasi yung July last year. No? In fact, July last year, bumaba ng almost 12%. Pero sa totoo lang, mas mataas na rin po yung manufacturing kaysa nung first quarter of last year. So nakabawi na po ang manufacturing sector natin. Isa pang indicator niya na talagang pataas na rin ang pag-consume nila ng kuryente. Yung sumunod na line, no, nasa 60.7, 21.1, 21%, 13.1%. So indicator po yan na ang manufacturing natin, mga pabrika natin, ay talagang umaandar na ulit. Pero the other thing I want you to look at in this graph, if I can find my arrow, yeah. Yung pong exports and imports natin. Noong isang taon, napansin siguro ng marami, parang tumataas ang value ng peso. Bumababa yung exchange rate sa dolyar. No? So yung sinasabi natin, tumataas ang value ng peso. Bakit? Well, actually, negative po yung exports natin. So bumaba yung pagpasok ng dolyar na mula doon sa mga ine-export natin. Kaya lang, lalong higit na bumaba yung lumalabas na dolyar dahil sa ating imports. So if you look in the earlier part last year, ito nang tinuturo dito, negative 4.8 po, bumaba ang exports, pero mahigit 2 times na ng pagbaba ng imports. Sa makatuwid, bumaba man ang pagpasok ng dolyar, lalong bumaba yung paglabas. So ang balanse niya, mas marami pa rin tayong hawak na dolyar. Kaya po tumataas yung value ng peso last year o bumababa yung exchange rate. Nagbago na po yan ngayon. Kasi, eto na naman po tayo ngayon. No? Makikita natin na ang ating exports as of the last July, last data available, tumataas na po ng 12.7%, pero mas mabilis ang pagtaas ng imports. So, pumapasok na uli ang dolyar, pero mas mabilis ang paglabas ng dolyar ngayon. Kaya po tumataas na naman ang exchange rate natin. Kasi yung supply ng dolyar sa ating ekonomiya ay mas mababa. So, this is the reason why the peso has been depreciating in recent months. Tingnan po natin ang remittances. Yan po nasa ilalim. No? Halos hindi siya naapektuhan po ng pandemya. Siguro, ayun, tingnan nyo, 3 buwan po last year. Hindi, 2 buwan dito, mula July to December, 2 buwan lang po na bumaba siya. Pero still, patuloy na pataas, although maliliit yung porsyento. In fact, ngayon, tuloy-tuloy na po na positive ulit yung pagtaas ng remittances natin. Kaya year to date, 5.8% ang pagtaas po ng ating remittances. So medyo magandang balita yun kasi mukhang hindi masyadong naapektuhan ang pasok ng ating remittances And therefore, yung hanap buhay ng ating mga kababayan na nasa abroad at doon nagtatrabaho. Okay, ayoko na po kayong dagdagan pa ng katakot-takot na numero. Siguro po ang dapat pag-usapan natin yung mas matinding tunay na cost nitong ating economic decline. Ito po yung human cost. And nadagdagan pa ito, bukod sa pandemya, ng mga kalamidad na pinag-usapan natin kanina. Well, ano po ang naging resulta? Number one, ang kahirapan, poverty, at ang pagkagutom, hunger. It really escalated in 2020. In fact, hunger doubled from the 2019 levels. Tingnan po natin ang datos ng social weather stations. As of November 2020, ito pong graph na ito, yung berde, yung po yung porsyento ng tao na nagsasabing hindi sila mahirap. Pero yung dilaw, sila yung nagsasabing nasa borderline po sila ng kahirapan. At yung pula, yun yung nagsasabing ang feeling nila mahirap sila. Ito po, record po ito na 16% lamang ang nagsabing hindi sila mahirap. Normal times, naglalaro hanggang mga 28% po yan. No? And so, this was actually the effect of the pandemic on people's poverty. Tumaas ang poverty, whether borderline poverty or outright absolute poverty. Kung po naman sa kanan, ito yung graph ng hunger, pagkagutom. Average for 2020 was 21.1%. So mahigit isa sa bawat 5 Pilipino nagutom ng isang taon. Samantalang nung 2019, it was only 9.3%. Wala pang isa sa bawat 10 ang nakaranas ng gutom. Talaga pong dumobling mahigit nitong past year. Andiyan po ang talaga naging isang kabahabahalang epekto ng pandemya sa atin. Maraming Pilipino nagutom. Natural, marami po kasing nawalan ng hanap buhay. Nung nag-lockdown tayo, maraming trabaho ang hindi maaaring magawa. So, ito lang po update, a little bit of better news. Kaya lang, hindi pa rin po umaabot sa normal. Nung June, naging 23% na po ulit itong not poor. Pero nung sa gutom naman po, 13.6%. Pero mas mahigit pa rin po yan doon sa 9.1, 9.3 na average nung 2019. So, that means marami pa rin Pilipinong gutom at naghihirap. Ang problema po dyan, gutom na nga ang mga tao, ibig sabihin, may pinagsimulan na po tayo na severe malnutrition, lalong-lalo na sa 5 years old and below. Alam niyo po, napakalaking problema yung stunting, yung pagkabansot, sanhi ng matinding pagkagutom, severe malnutrition. Let me just share with you the numbers. No? It's literally an epidemic because 1 out of 3 children 5 years old and below is stunted because of severe malnutrition. And here, the numbers show 33.4 as of 2015. Bumaba na po ng bahagya mula nung 2015. Now it's still almost 1 out of 3 pa rin po. No? Pero bumababa na closer to 1 out of 4. So there's some improvement. Pero tingnan niyo po yung pinanggalingan natin noong 1989. Halos 1 out of every 2 Filipinos then was severely malnourished, Filipinos 5 years old and below, rather. Severely malnourished kaya bansot, kaya stunted. Now, this is a problem because, alam niyo po, physiologists will tell us that 90% of brain development happens before age 5. After age 5, yung remaining 10% na lang of brain development is what will happen. So pag by age 5, compromised yung brain development ng bata, apektado na siya habang buhay. And the full brain and physical development of the child will never be attained anymore. Now, if you look at the brain scans of a healthy child and a stunted child, kitang-kita po na kulang yung white matter sa utak. No? At dyan po nanggagaling yung ating cognitive ability, yung ating intelligence, memory, and so on. Kaya, like I said, a stunted child is damaged for life. Kaya nakakalungkot po, napaka-long term ang magiging impact nitong gutom na nag-escalate nitong COVID-19. In fact, meron pong datos na in a cross-country comparison of average IQ sa populasyon, lumalabas po na Pilipinas pala pinakamababa. mas mababa pa ang average IQ ng Pilipino compared to Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Indonesia. So, ako po, nang iniisip ko ito, mukhang ito'y dahil nga din sa fact na remember kanina nakita natin 44.5% of children 5 years old and below as of 1989 were stunted and severely malnourished. Ngayon po sila na yung working age population natin ngayon. So medyo siguro na-compromise ang intelligence ng henerasyon na yon. Kaya po tayo ganito ang nakikita natin ngayon. So this is really a long-term issue. And alam po natin, dagdag pa dyan, yung parang napakababang performance ng education natin. Many of you have heard about the PISA or the Program for International Student Assessment. Na again, comparison across countries of the abilities of third-year-old or junior high school students. In all the countries, sa third-year high school po nila sinusukat kasi nandun po sila sa medyo sa lugar na maa-assess na natin kung ano yung quality ng edukasyon ng mga bata. Kulelat po tayo sa mundo, sa PISA na yan, nakakahiya po. Whether in science or mathematics or reading comprehension, nangungulelat po ang Pilipinas. In one category, I forgot which one, second to the last. Pero Consuelo de Bobo din po yun. So what are we seeing here? I think the severe malnutrition and stunting that was already afflicting us since the 1980s has taken its toll even now. What more into the future if we do not stop this problem of severe malnutrition na pinatindi nga po ng pagtaas ng hunger in the past year. So this is the reason why we have to look at these problems. Now, as I said, education is another one. No? It took a severe blow in the past year kasi hindi nga po makapasok. Hanggang ngayon, hindi pa makapasok sa eskwelahan ng mga bata. So remote learning lang po, di ba? Like, ang problema sa remote learning, pag wala pong internet yung bata o wala nung gadget na pang-access ng internet, edi etchapwera na sa ating edukasyon. And this is what happened. Children of the poor and from far-flung communities who have no connectivity ay hindi po nakinabang sa ating remote learning process. No? In fact, pati teacher, hindi makakuha ng signal. Tingnan niyo po yung litrato sa kanan, sa ilalim. Maakit pa ng bubong yung mga teacher para lang makakuha ng signal para makakommunicate ng mga leksyon sa mga estudyante nila. So with that, we can really see very long-term threats to the country's future coming out of this COVID pandemic. Matatagalan po tayo na mababawi yung nawala sa atin itong paraang taon hanggang ngayon po. So this is really what worries me most. The future of our country has been compromised by how we have been able to handle the pandemic in the past year. Well, let me go to the outlook ngayon. So saan tayo pumupunta? Well, I talk about green shoots, meaning yung mga hopeful signs, and road bumps or also hurdles. No? Well, let's look at some positive news. Manufacturing growth, nabanggit ko na, positive na po yan. So madami pong magandang hanap buhay sa manufacturing kasi yan yung mga may SSS, may PhilHealth and all that. So it's good news that manufacturing is recovering. Now, if you look at level of manufacturing output, bumawi na rin po, nabanggit ko kanina. Ang mga leader po dyan sa pagbangon ulit ng manufacturing, computers, electronic and optical products, yung po mga ine-export natin, karamihan electronics and so on. Hindi ko nababasahin po lahat nung nandiyan sa listahan. Chemical products, another important export natin. How I wish kasama dyan ang agricultural products. Kasi po, isa ko pong favorite na lament, no? na pinanghihinayangan. Ang ating pong mga neighboring countries sa ASEAN, ang mga ine-export nilang agricultural products, umaabot po ng up to $90 billion. No? Ang Vietnam po na sunod sa atin, $15 billion ang exports. Ang Thailand, mga 40 billion. Ang Malaysia, mga 50 billion. Tayo po, 5 billion lang. So, napag-iwanan tayo ng mga tinuruan natin ng agriculture. So, sana, nais ko sanang mapabilang dyan yung exports natin kung bakit tayo napag-iwanan. Anyway, pag-uusapan din po natin yan. Merong hopeful signs sa airlines, although malayo pa bago bumalik sa dati. Binigyan po ako ng datos ng Cebu Pacific tungkol sa flights at saka passenger load nila. At ang nakikita is, okay, bumabangon na po kasi nag-nosedive nga po siya. Tingnan niyo sa kaliwa. No? 4,391 flights per quarter before nagpandemya. Nung tumama yung pandemya, second quarter last year, 61 flights na lang po ang naipalipad nila. O bumabangon na po, umabot na ng 604 flights in 3-month period or 1 quarter as of the second quarter of 2021. Yun naman pong pasahero, kung yun ang bibilangin, ganun din, nag-nosedive from almost 30,000 passengers ang nililipat nila sa isang quarter. Naging 597 lang po. Baka yan pa yung mga special flight na mga government officials and health workers. I'm not sure, no? Pero yun po, bumangon na po, nasa mahigit 5,000 na, pero napakabagal pa rin compared to the normal times of up to 30,000 passengers. Ang magandang balita po sa akin ng Philippine Airlines, ito, yung mga na-cancel na ticket o na-cancel na flight last year, dalawa po ang option ng mga bumili ng ticket. Either i-refund mo, o humingi ka na ng complete refund ng binayad sa ticket, or i-rebook, o kaya open ticket muna, nagagamitin pa, pero tsaka na lang i-schedule. Ang sabi ng Philippine Airlines, natutuwa sila dahil itong recent months in 2021, mas marami na po yung nagre-rebook na lang at hindi nagre-refund. So ibig sabihin, optimistic na yung mga tao na bumili ng ticket na malapit na, makakalipad na rin sila. Kaya hindi na lang muna babawiin yung binayad. So this is the kind of hopeful sign that Philippine Airlines is banking on. Kasi nga po, nabalita siguro nyo na ang Philippine Airlines nag-file for bankruptcy sa Amerika para hindi na sila habulin ng mga nagpautang sa kanila, yung mga American banks. Kasi meron naman sa batas sa Amerika na gano'n, you file for bankruptcy, you will not be forced to pay on time whatever you owe. But talagang hikahos ang ating mga airline kasi talagang nawalan ng pasahero. Now, other hopeful signs, right now, agriculture is mostly growing positively, including traditional crops like rice, corn, coconut, sugarcane, and banana. And OFW remittances, sabi ko nga, halos bahagya lang naman siya naapektuhan. So it's now growing at a cumulative rate of 5.8% as of July. And then again, nabanggit na rin natin kanina, exports and imports are growing double digit. And the fact that imports are growing, kahit na faster ang pag-grow ng imports, hindi po dapat masyado tayong mabahala doon. Kasi alam niyo po, ang karamihan naman po ng imports natin ay inputs to production. Hindi po yung consumer goods o mga pagkain. Kasi ang total imports po natin, about 85% are either fuel, capital equipment, raw materials, or intermediate products na mag-feed into further production. Mga 15% lang po yung mga pagkain, mga luxury goods, mga electronics, etc. So in short, pag tumataas po ang imports natin, it's a good sign because it means that nag-i-import na naman po yung mga factory na nakahanda na, taasan na naman yung kanilang production. But ano po yung ating mga hurdles? Number one, yung patuloy na pandemic. Although lately, medyo gumaganda balita, no? Nasa 3,000 mahigit na lang daw yung new cases as of yesterday. So still, tinamaan nga tayo. Yung second wave, lalong tumaas. Andiyan yung naka-apekto sa ating economic performance in the recent months. No? So that has been a challenge. And on top of that, yung vaccination ng tao mabagal. Tingnan po natin, iba pang datos. Ito, yung sa vaccination, although medyo kailangan i-update na ito, ang Pilipinas, isa sa mga lower rates of vaccination among our neighbors. Ang nadaig lang po natin, yung Indonesia, Vietnam, Myanmar. Kasi yung Laos, daig pa rin tayo sa first dose. So in short, our vaccine rollout needs to further speed up. Of course, we all know the government is trying its best to already speed up the rollout of our vaccination. Pero we're still lagging behind our neighbors or better at the vaccination. In fact, ito po nakakalungkot. According to social weather stations again, record high 91% ng Pilipino. Ngayon, this was as of last October 12 lang. No? Ang natatakot pa rin sa COVID. And so, Filipinos are even more afraid now of COVID than ever. Mas lalo tayong takot lumabas. Mas lalo tayong takot na mag-resume ng ating normal economic activities. Andiyan po ang numero unong kalaban ng pag-angat ng ekonomiya natin. Pag wala pa rin tayong kumpiyansa, wala pa rin tayong confidence to go back to our regular activities before the pandemic. Tingnan nyo yung survey doon sa kanan. When respondents were asked whether they think the worst is behind us or whether the worst is yet to come, 60% po ang nagsabi, umaasa na lalo pang titindi. The worst is yet to come. So it tells us something about the confidence that needs to be restored if our economy is to regain its level of activity. So second hurdle, no? First hurdle, by the way, resurging pandemic. The second hurdle was very low confidence. The third hurdle is yung ability natin na mag-attract ng foreign direct investments na makakatulong sa paggawa ng karagdagang trabaho sa ating mga manggagawa. If you look at the total stock of foreign investments in the country, according to this comparable data from SantanderTrade.com, tayo po ay $103 billion worth of foreign investments lang ang nasa bansa natin ngayon. This is the accumulation of foreign direct investments from past years up to now. Stock po yan, hindi yung flow na per year. Malaysia is almost twice na sa atin. At of course, tingnan nyo may Singapore, $1.3 trillion worth of foreign investments in that very small country. Now, bukod doon, bumababa pa yung foreign investments na pumapasok sa atin taon-taon. Ito naman yung inflows, not the stock. No? Nag-peak tayo noong 2017 kung kailan $10.3 billion ang pumasok na direct investments. Kung sinabi pong direct investments, hindi yan yung portfolio investment na in-invest lang sa stock market. Talagang investment in real production, no? Like factories and whatever else. 4 years in a row na pong bumababa yan. At ang nakakalungkot, Vietnam at Indonesia, within that 4-year period, tumaas po yung kanila. Pero tayo patuloy na pababa. In fact, tayo lang, tuloy-tuloy na bumaba mula noong 2017. This is telling us that our country has become so unattractive to foreign direct investors so that yung ability natin to create new jobs coming from foreign investments is severely compromised. Mamaya pag-usapan natin kung gusto nyo, kung yung dahilan. No? Pero ang exports po natin, ito po yung nakakalungkot talagang tingnan. This is not just agricultural exports, total exports ito. No? 69 billion po ang average natin per year in the last 5 years or 4 years. Ang sumunod sa atin, Indonesia, na mahigit doble ito sa atin. And of course, Singapore, mataas siya, $387 billion average. You can see, kulelat na naman tayo sa ating mga comparable ASEAN neighbors. Never mind yung Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, maliliit na ekonomiya po kasi yan. So this is the sad reality of our situation. Na hindi tayo maka-compare man lamang sa ating mga neighboring countries dahil parang napaka-backward po na ekonomiya natin, unfortunately. Tapos tinamaan pa ng pinakamalalim, pinakamatindi na damage ng COVID-19. Here is the fourth hurdle. Marami nang nagsara ng negosyo, whether large or small. Of course, mas marami yung small. Yung litrato po sa kaliwa, yan ay kinuha ng isang kasamahan ko sa Ateneo, isang co-faculty member ko sa Ateneo. Kasi meron din po siyang maliit na negosyo sa Paranaque na pinasara na rin niya. No? At ito nakita niya, isang tambak na business permit na ni-retire na rin ng mga owners nila sa Paranaque City Hall. Napakaraming sinara na. Ang mahirap po sa sinara na, mahirap na uling buksan kung gustong buksan ulit. No? Kung sabihin na natin mag-normalize ulit economy natin. It will not be easy once they have already been formally closed. They'll have to set up an entirely new business altogether. Now, even large business firms like Philippine Airlines have been cutting thousands of jobs, and even food chains like itong KFC ng UP Los Baños. Ito po, kuha ko yung litratong ito sa labas ng gate ng UP Los Baños. Boarded up na po yung KFC namin dito. Mabuti na lang yung McDonald's at Jollibee, buhay pa. Kaya lang, puro take-out nga lang. Kanilang benta. Kaya mahinang-mahina din po. So this is a big obstacle to economic recovery when a lot of the businesses that you are banking on have already closed down. The fifth hurdle is inflation itself. Nakita na natin ito kanina yung graph na ito. And kaya po ito problema is kahit na yung ang dahilan sa inflation natin is nasa supply side dahil sa kakulangan ng karne, dahil nagka-African swine fever, at dahil na rin sa kakulangan ng isda, dahil nandun tayo sa ang tawag nila ay yung closed months for fishing sa ating fishing grounds. Kasi meron po tayong regular na time na binabawal ang pangingisda para makarejuvenate yung ating fishing grounds. Tinamaan po tayo nun ngayon, kaya mataas ang presyo ng isda. We have to import more fish. Only to stabilize the prices of fish, we have had to import more pork, also to stabilize the prices of pork. Hindi pa nga din sapat dahil mataas pa rin. Ano? Now, all of this is really leading to a situation when baka yung Bangko Sentral mapilitan na gumamit ng monetary policy para medyo mapigil yung pagtaas ng presyo. And that means bababaan nila ang money supply, which means tataasan ng interest rates, which will mean masasakal ang negosyo pag tumaas ang interest rate. Mas lalo magiging mabigat ang pag-utang sa bangko kung mataas ang interest rates. Kaya yan po ang isa pang banta. It's a hurdle that we have to really overcome, because if inflation keeps accelerating, then the Bangko Sentral may finally have to succumb. Alam niyo po, si Governor Biennial up to now, pinipigil talaga nila at saka ng Monetary Board na itaas ang interest rates. Kasi alam nila na pag ginawa nila yon, masasakal ang ekonomiya natin. But that is the solution to skyrocketing inflation. So eventually, pag tuloy-tuloy pong pataas yung presyo, mapipilitan sila na sakalin ang buong ekonomiya with restricting the money supply with higher interest rates. So yan po ang napaka-komplikadong mga hinaharap ng ating economic managers. So it's a very, very difficult balancing act that they have to do. So paano po ang naging solusyon natin sa pandemya? Alam na po natin yung bayanihan 1 and 2, di ba? Na ibig sabihin, massive government spending. The only way to revive the economy is to put a lot of money in it, and gobyerno lang ang pwedeng panggalingan itong nakaraang taon kasi maraming negosyo na nagsara, tumigil. Pero how do we use that money that is being poured by the government into the economy? Well, ang aking pong matagal ng argument dyan, dapat po ilagay sa bulsa ng taong bayan, hindi sa mga bangko. No? And problema po kasi, merong iba na sabi, ibigyan ng pera, ilagay ang pera sa banking system para makahiram ang mga maliliit na negosyo. Pero paano ba naman hihiram ang maliit na negosyo kung wala naman silang customer? In fact, none of them really want to borrow if they know that they cannot really do good business anyway, because people don't have money to spend for their goods or their services. So the first thing to do, put it in the people's pockets. Sustain the cash transfers for the poor, for the hungry and the displaced because of the COVID-19. Next, ibuhos sa the 3 T's na tinatawag: testing, tracing, treatment. In other words, manage COVID-19 well. Pero inamin naman po ng ating gobyerno na sa testing and tracing, talagang medyo mahina ang performance. That's an understatement. Meron pang nagsabi, palpak talaga. Yung tracing po natin, ito po ang datos. In our neighboring countries, for every positive case ng COVID na na-test nila, they are able to trace about 20 other people na naging contacts nung positive na yon. Sa atin po, according to the data, we are only able to trace 5 to 6 contacts of those positive. So hindi po ganun kagaling yung ating tracing system. Kasi po sa ibang countries, lalo sa Korea, sa Singapore, Thailand, high-tech po talagang nasa smartphone natin yung app. No? So in fact, malalaman mo na lang na ikaw pala ay nagka-contact sa isang COVID positive because may darating na message. No? So this is what they used. Talagang they use digital technology to help their tracing. Hindi po natin nagawa. Hindi natin ginastusan eh. Alam mo po, ang ginastusan natin, tao, na sila daw yung magiging tracer, di ba? So this is the kind of mismanagement among other things that we had. Kulang po ang ginastos natin dyan. Ngayon po, ang nakakalungkot, yung ginastos na po natin, yun pa yung, alam niya, yung Paranaque scandal, na hindi pa tama ang pinuntahan. So pinuntahan daw ay mga, well, of course, we can already surmise na mukhang may mga kumita na ipinili ng mga Ferrari at mga Porsche sports car. I don't want to deal more in that. No? But the other important thing about stimulus money is to maximize the multiplier effect by spending it on Philippine-made goods and ideally locally made goods sa ating mga komunidad. Why? Kasi meron po sa economy sa tinatawag na multiplier effect. Nanggagaling po yan sa pagbawat gumastos ng pera, iikot at iikot pa yun sa ekonomiya. In other words, I like to say to my students as one person's spending becomes another person's income. So umiikot po ang pera sa ekonomiya. Ngayon, pag sa panahong ito, ibili natin ng imported yung pera na yan. Tulad nung isang taon, nabalita na bibili daw ang Malacanang na isang jet plane na bago para sa Pangulo kung kailan nasa gitna tayo ng pandemya. Medyo ako'y nainis at nabahala sapagkat bilyon-bilyon ang ibabayad mo sa labas na doon magmumultiplier effect sa Amerika kasi doon ginawa yung jet plane na bibilin. Pati po yung vaccines, unfortunately, imported kasi wala tayong sariling vaccine production dito eh. So, nawawala din po yung multiplier effect. So, ang tanging masasabihan ko na lang po nito, tayo mismo mga taong bayan. Hanggat maaari po, ipatronize natin ang sarili natin. Ang ating sariling manufactured products, sariling agricultural products. So, hindi man mapigil na mag-import tayo, let's make a preference for domestic goods. Pero hindi lang yon. Make a preference for your own local community's goods. Kasi nito pong pandemya, siguro napansin natin, no? Lalo na yung mga nasa probinsya tulad namin dito sa Los Baños. Aba, dumami po yung dumarating na sa aming harapan. No? Nagbebenta ng gulay, ng isda, ng karne, pati na po yung mga balde na plastic, sari-saring household goods, nilalako na po, door to door. No? So in short, let's take the example of vegetables. No? Dati, karamihan ng vegetables na bibili natin sa supermarket o sa palengke, nanggaling pa po ng Baguio o Benguet. Ngayon, yung mga nagdadala niya sa ating mga pintuan, usually ang mga galing lang sa mga kalapit natin. Marami kasi nag-backyard gardening. Marami namang bukid din sa mga malapit sa atin. So the supply chains of agricultural products became shorter as a result of the pandemic by force. No? Pero maganda po yan kasi the more you buy locally, the more nabubuhay natin yung local economy natin. In fact, matagal ko na pong panuntunan sa aming pamilya yan. Kasi ako, ang taga Los Baños po ako, dito ako nag-uuwian araw-araw. Pero ang trabaho ko kalimitan, lalo na during normal times, ay sa Maynila. So I can really buy whatever we need in Manila anytime, every day. No? Pero meron po kami policy na kung mabibili rin lang sa Los Baños, sa aming sariling lugar, kahit na mas mahal ng kaunti, dito na natin bilhin para makatulong tayo sa local economy, sa mga hanap buhay ng mga taga Los Baños. So this is the kind of advice and recommendation I'll have to any of you. Na buy local, including your own local communities. You will help enliven your own local economy. Now, having said all that, that's only the time that it makes sense to put money in the banks to lend to small businesses. Kasi nga, kung wala namang customer, wala namang hihiram sa bangko. So this is how, now of course, we need to help the small businesses to be able to retain their workers especially. Kaya lang, even before COVID, ang problema po ng maliliit na negosyo, napakaraming hurdles, napakaraming paperwork sa BIR, napakaraming kailangang bayaran, buwan-buwan. Yung pong anak ko na may-ari ng maliit na restaurant dito sa Los Baños, ang tanging daing niya lagi, nauubos ang oras niya sa pag-fill up ng mga dokumento, at pabalik-balik sa BIR, sa SSS, kung saan-saan, sa halip na magamit yung oras niya sa lalong pag-aalaga ng kanyang negosyo. Tapos nagkaroon pa ng additional cost of COVID safety measures like labing alcohol sa pintuan, scanner, nagkaroon pa ng COVID test bawat empleyado, lahat po yan talagang sinagot ng negosyo. I argue that dapat dyan sinubsidize ang small business. Yun na lang COVID test sana, libre na sa mga empleyado. Pero hindi po, babayad pa rin tayo ng hanggang mahigit 3,000 piso. No? So this is the kind of assistance that small businesses would have needed. And then of course, ease the red tape and all these documentary requirements na nagiging balakid sa pagbangon ulit ng maliliit na negosyo. In fact, natakot pa yung iba kasi nung nagkaroon ng maraming maabilidad na nag-online business na lang, ano? Binantaan pa na kailangan mag-register kayo at kailangan magbayad din kayo ng buwis. Sa lalo na naman na-discourage itong mga coping mechanisms ng ating mga maliliit na negosyante. So, on a hopeful note, ano yung sektor na ekonomiya natin na magpapabangon sa ating ekonomiya? I maintain there are two wheels that we are riding on right now. The first wheel, the front wheel, which is for more inclusive growth of our economy, is agriculture and agribusiness. The rear wheel is the one that will give it more speed and more acceleration, is the digital economy. Now, let me talk about each of these in turn. No? Ang agriculture po, napakahalaga talaga. Kanina ko pa sinasabi. No? Nasabi ko na because it is proven to be resilient through the pandemic-induced recession. Second, it's all over the country, including Metro Manila. Uso na rin ang urban agriculture ngayon. Third, agriculture is very closely interlinked with the rest of our economy. First, it is highly labor intensive, so maraming hanap buhay dyan. Second, it has strong linkages both forward and backward in the other industries of the economy. When I say backward linkage, halimbawa, agriculture kasi bumibili ng fertilizer, ng mga chemicals, mga buto. Other industries are the ones producing that. So nakakabuhay sila ng ibang industriya na nagpo-produce ng mga inputs ng agriculture. Yung forward linkage, yun naman yung mga bumibili ng produkto ng agriculture dahil raw material sa kanilang production. So the food manufacturing industry is a very strong forward linkage. The hotels and restaurant industry is an important forward linkage kasi yung mga pagkain sinisilbi nila galing din sa agricultural sector. In short, hindi po tulad ng electronics na number one export po natin. Alam nyo ba ng electronics, number one export natin, pero ang electronics din ang number one import natin. Ibig sabihin, whatever we export in electronics only has a very thin domestic content in it. Yun lang pong assembly labor kasi in-import din po yung mga components. Ang ginawa lang ng ating electronics industry, karamihan, kababaihan, yung mga workers dyan, i-assemble sa circuit boards. And then, export ulit. Walang ibang nakinabang na sektor ng ekonomiya natin, kundi yung mga kababaihan ng trabaho para i-assemble yung electronic products. So that is the opposite of agriculture. Hardly any domestic economic linkages. That's why agriculture is so important. And the last is, dahil nga sa tindi ng pandemya, yung mga red zones ay nandun yung mga Metro Manila, Metro Cebu, Metro Davao. Makikita po natin. I'll show you some charts to show this. First, yung resilience. Tingnan niyo po yung ating performance ng agriculture, including last year. Yung pong mga blue, yan po yung mga positive. Yung mga green, negative. By the way, may explanation po ako dyan. Ako po ay Ateneo professor ngayon. So good news comes in blue and bad news comes in the other color. So eto po. If you look at the latest numbers, matindi po yung decline ng livestock, 23.4, 19.5. Yan po ang nag-pull down ng average ng buong sektor to negative 0.1. Pero kung hindi po dyan sa African swine fever na yan, positive po ang agriculture. Kakunti po yung bumaba. Mango, bahagya. Coffee, bahagya. Cassava, negative 4.4, and so on. Most of the others are doing very well actually at this time. So in short, mukhang tama naman po ang ginagawa ng ating Department of Agriculture at ang dahilan lang kaya bumababa itong mga factors beyond our control. Of course, itong African swine fever dapat makontrol natin pero medyo hindi rin po yata tama yung ginagawa ng ating mga otoridad sa African swine fever. Ito naman po yung all regions of the country. Tingnan nyo, kahit NCR sa kaliwa, meron yan na agriculture. This is the percent of GRDP of the regional gross domestic product. Of course, ang pinakamaraming agriculture, Region 3, Central Luzon. So we can see that it is geographically inclusive as an industry or sa sector. And then, ito nga yung tinatawag kong linkages. Contributions to job, agriculture ang second highest. In fact, it's a very, very close second to wholesale and retail trade. Almost 8 million jobs ang galing sa agriculture. About 1/5 of all the jobs in the economy galing sa agriculture. Pero bukod po doon, ang agriculture nga nakalink sa mga may blue arrow na yan. Agricultural products are traded, so it also helps the trading sector. They are manufactured in the food processing industry. They are transported and stored. And of course, they go to the accommodation, the hotels and restaurants. No? Kaya yan po yung interlinkages na sinasabi ko. In short, hindi lang yung direct employment effect ng agriculture or farming itself, but the employment effect in these other sectors that are very closely linked. Yan po ang employment contribution ng agriculture. In terms of contribution to GDP, it may look lower down the line, 6.5% contribution as of the last that I looked, no? 2019 po siguro ito. Pero again, because of the close linkage with manufacturing, trade, other services, and transport and storage, malaki po ang contribution. In other words, pag tinignan natin ang agribusiness as a whole, including the allied industries, malaki po talaga ang contribution ng agriculture sa ating ekonomiya. Now, that means agriculture can help drive our economic recovery overall, including in other key industries that are closely linked to the sector. Now, geographically, ito po yung mapa ng Pilipinas sa COVID, kung saan pinakamatindi. Yung pula ang pinakamatindi ang COVID. So nakita nyo, Metro Manila and surrounding provinces, Metro Cebu, meron din sa Iloilo, tsaka yung Davao area. Where is the GDP contribution highest? Tingnan nyo po, halos yun din. Yung almost the same places that are highlighted in the COVID map. Where are the jobs mostly located? Naku, doon din po. So, the conclusion I get out of this, the areas that can contribute the most to restoring jobs, production, and incomes are also where it's most risky to ease up on our quarantines. So the conclusion I have is that the safest place for economic recovery is in the countryside regions where agriculture is the dominant occupation. Balik talaga tayo sa agriculture. Now, let me go to the other wheel, digital economy. Alam naman natin yan, yun yung Lazada, Shopee, sa shopping, sa mga meeting and events, Zoom, Google Teams, ano pa ba yan? Cisco, Webex, mga iba-iba pang produkto na online conferencing. Education is now, ano natin, distance learning, remote. No? Entertainment, andyan ang Netflix. Sa halip na magpunta sa sinihan, Netflix na lang tayo. Payments, andyan ang Paymaya, mga GCash and all of that. And all the other business-to-business transactions, electronic na, online. And even manufacturing processes, dahil nga sa dumating na itong Fourth Industrial Revolution, also known as Industry 4.0. This is the new normal, talagang digital economy. Hindi na apektuhan ng pandemya, in fact, bumugso sila lalo, and all the more, they will continue to drive our economy after the pandemic itself. It's also, by the way, ito yung graph ng InstaPay at PesoNet. Nakikita nyo how in the past year, 2020, it really surged because people by force had to learn how to pay how to use the e-payment systems. Hindi ako nakakuha ng statistics ng GCash, but I'll bet lalong bumugso yun. Now, it is also something that helps agriculture and agribusiness. Why? Because yung mga digital applications in agriculture, including Internet of Things, including blockchain, nakakatulong po na maging exciting ang agriculture and agribusiness ngayon. It is actually attracting more young people back to the farms. Dahil as you know, we have been lamenting how the average age of a Filipino farmer is now about 60. Sabi nila several years ago, 57. By now, mga 60 na yan sigurado. But the recent developments where digital applications are being applied to agriculture has attracted more young people. And I know a good number of them now. Nasa all sorts of agribusiness because na-excite sila na marami palang posibilidad using drone technology, using LiDAR for yung geographical mapping, and of course using digital apps like yung Uber type of apps that will connect the farmers directly to their consumers or the suppliers of their inputs directly to the farmers and so on. So it is also enabling agriculture. Kaya lang ang kailangan natin niya, improvement in our connectivity. More public and private investments are needed and better access to everybody. Hindi yung mayayaman at may kaya lang ang makakakuha ng internet na yan. Also, it requires an upgraded logistics system kasi ang shopping na po natin yan, hindi na sa mga SM o Landmark o mga Robinsons eh. Nasa Shopee at Lazada na. And alam naman natin, yung link, the last mile link to the consumer is those motorcycle riding men. I have yet to see a woman, but motorcycle riding men of J&T Express, Lalamove, Ninja Van, all these other delivery services. Kaya po ang sabi ko, na-defeminize ang ating retail industry. Instead of those uniformed young ladies in the SM and Robinsons department stores and supermarkets, nagiging mga motorcycle riding men na po yung ating link to our shopping. So that logistic system has a lot of room for improvement to make it even more efficient. And one personal thing I'd like to see is more motorcycle riding women. Para naman hindi nalgabyado ang kababaihan dito sa restructuring of our retail industry. So recently I wrote in my column that COVID-19 actually helped us speed up something that is inevitable, the fourth industrial revolution. Dahil napilitan tayo nga na matuto ng mga GCash, ng mga InstaPay, ng mga PesoNet and all these other online ways of paying for things. But government has to be the one at the forefront kasi meron tayong mga government agencies na up to now hindi pa rin ganung digitally enabled. No? So up to now, yung mga serbisyo nila, pahirapan pa rin. So that's the reason I wrote this particular article some time back. Just to give you my forecast for the coming year and for the rest of this year, the inflation rate is now at between 4 to 5%, and that is where it will be for the remainder of the year. The employment rate is averaging 92 to 93%, which is the same as 7 to 8% unemployment. Because constrained pa rin po yung recovery natin, so I don't expect us to be able to go back to the 5% unemployment rate in the near future. And our GDP growth for this year is likely to be 3 to 4%, especially given the pace of our growth before COVID. And here, let me just take a little bit of time to show you. I hope, well, if you can't follow the graphical analysis, you don't have to worry about it. Pero ito yung pinakita ko kanina na 11.8 yung naiulat, no? Pero sa katotohanan, it was really a negative. Tapos, sa third quarter na hindi pa po dumarating, ang data po niyan darating sa Nobyembre pa. Yung third quarter, malamang lalo pong bumaba compared to sa second quarter. Dahil lalong tumindi yung lockdowns ng ating mga quarantine noong July, August, and September compared to the previous 3 months. So I expect it to go down like this. And if you look at that, supposing nandun sa graph yung ganyan, compared to the same quarter a year ago, 3 to 4% po. So more or less yan ang ina-expect ko na iuulat sa atin na year-on-year GDP growth when the third quarter numbers come out in November. Now, if I'm to be optimistic na tataas na ekonomiya natin after the third quarter, may tatlong senaryo po ako. The optimistic, the medium, and the pessimistic scenario. Ngayon, tingnan po muna natin. Where were we in fourth quarter 2019? Ayun po, yung level na yon na mahigit 4.9 trillion. No? Ngayon, we will get back there in the optimistic scenario at the end of next year. We will get back to that level in the medium scenario at the end of 2023. Pag ang naging tunay nating trajectory, yung pessimistic scenario, baka abutin pa tayo ng 2025. Bago lang natin mabawi where we were in 2023. Now, in terms of the growth rates we expect to be announced, well, sa fourth quarter po, kahit tingnan ko yung optimistic graph at nandun tayo sa fourth quarter, kumpara doon sa ating fourth quarter 2020, ang diferensya po nun mga 1 to 2% lang. So kung i-average natin yung 4 quarters, negative 4.3 ng first quarter, positive 11.8 ng second quarter, 3 to 4 ng third quarter, and 1 to 2, the average po is about 3.5. That's why pinaninindigan ko po yung aking projection na 3 to 4% ang magiging growth natin. Since January, yan na po ang aming projection sa Ateneo, according to our econometric model. Maalala nyo siguro, since January, ang mga projection ng IMF, ng gobyerno natin, 6 to 7%. Ano po nangyari? Itong past months, baba sila ng baba. Dina-downscale nila. Ngayon, ang IMF ang sabi, 3.4 na lang. Pero meron pa rin nagsasabi 4 to 5%. I think that's still too optimistic. Ayoko naman pong sabihin na I don't want to be so pessimistic, but I just want to be realistic about it. And that is really the outlook right now. So, yan ang projection ng IMF. All the emerging market and developing economies will average 6.3% growth this year. The Philippines will this time lag behind at about 3 to 4%. And the reason I show this is because in the past years, up to recently, pag ikukumpara ko po yung sinasabi ng IMF at ano yung actual natin, lagi tayong mas mataas. For the first time in so many years, magiging mas mababa tayo sa projection ng IMF to sa mga comparable nations and economies to ours, which is really very sad. Now, ano po ang role ng eleksyon? makikita natin na pag election year, ang typical na nangyayari, mas mataas ang paglago ng ekonomiya natin. In fact, if you look at all the election years since 2001, the average GDP growth was 6.2%. But non-election years, the average was only 5.1%. So there's something about election years. And I think malinaw naman po sa atin kung bakit. Napakaraming perang umiikot. Yung mga perang na itago sa mga Swiss accounts, sa Hong Kong, sa Cayman Islands, sa Virgin Islands, bumabalik dito kasi ginagamit sa kampanya eh. So this is really what's going to happen. It will again help perk up our economy next year during the election year, even before that, no? The months before that. So in general, the observation is dumadami nga ang pera and may mga mahigit 1 percentage point na increase in the GDP growth. Dahil maraming ginagastusan, campaign expenditures for posters, tarps, streamers, sari-sari. No? Hindi ko na babasahin isa-isa yan. Pero may isang pagkakaiba this year. Because of the pandemic and because of limited physical activities outdoors, most of the campaign spending will be going to the broadcast and social media, including paying a lot of money for the trolls who create fake Facebook accounts to make it look like a certain candidate has so many supporters. And yan po ang ginamit na isang taktika daw nitong 2016 elections. Mga hackers, mga troll armies ang umiiral. And marami, billion po ang ginagastos dyan. In short, yung pong benefits ng ating election year uptick, hindi magiging kasing pangmalawakan tulad nung dati. Kasi hindi na po ibibili ng t-shirts, hindi na ibibili ng mga pagkain, pakakain sa mga taong uma-attend sa rally, etc. etc. Karamihan doon pupunta sa mga social media at broadcast media. So the benefits of the election spending will be less likely widely spread this time. So finally, ano bang kailangan sa pagpapatuloy natin? Sana yung ating magiging pinuno, sino man siya, i-sustain yung ating growth because number one, speed up the infrastructure build up. Kasi po ang problema natin, yung build, medyo tumirik ng kaunti dahil ang spending rate ng ating DPWH saka DOTR, kung titingnan niyo po sa COA, yung kanilang audit reports for the past 4 years, alam niyo po ba na ang DPWH, wala pang 40% ng budget niya ang nagagastos niya taon-taon. Ang DOTR, Department of Transport, wala pa pong 30% ang nagastos niya sa kanyang budget nitong nakaraan taon. Their ability to absorb a much larger budget for build has been very questionable. Kaya nga nagde-depend na ulit ang gobyerno sa public-private partnerships na mga project ng San Miguel, no? Yung bagong airport sa Bulacan, yung NLEX SLEX connector, puro po PPP yan. Hindi po DPWH at saka DOTR yan. We have to get our act together in infrastructure. Second, all these investment restrictions that are still keeping us from catching up with our neighbors. Nakita na natin kanina kung paano tayo nangungulelat. No? And then, regulatory burdens that are actually making it harder for business to do business. And of course, corruption, which is making us very unattractive for investments both by Filipinos and by foreigners. To make sure yung development po natin is pangmalawakan ng pakinabang, inclusive development, we have to really double up our support for small enterprises, micro, small, and medium enterprise. Ating puksain ang gutom at malnutrition, and we have to invest into our future, health and education. Our public health system really needs a big boost, our universal health care, in our hospitals and our health centers, and of course our schools need a lot of attention. So right now, ang summary statement ko lang po is economic recovery appears to be underway, pero how fast or how slowly it will unfold hinges on how we bring our COVID-19 numbers down. So health recovery remains our top priority. So maraming salamat po, and I'll be happy to answer some questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Habito, for that realistic, inclusive, and comprehensive look at the current Philippine situation. So I think marami kaming napulot at mga takeaways. So for our Q&A, ito po ang gagawin po natin po mga kapatid for your question and answer. We would like to encourage everyone, or we will entertain questions that will be placed on the chat box. Okay, so we will no longer entertain the raise of hands, but rather we will entertain the questions through the chat box. Okay, so if you want to raise some questions addressed to Professor Habito, please write down your questions sa chat box. So sir, meron po kaming isang question po dito. So una, nakalagay dito, do we have available data on earnings for virtual activities like YouTube bloggers and similar earning activities?
Hindi ko po alam kung saan manggagaling yung data na yan. Pero palagay ko po, posible eh. But frankly, I don't know personally how to access that kind of data. I believe there are certain organizations that try to track this. Although at best, I'm sure, never precise measurement, pero at best, there should be some somewhat reliable estimates of this. Unfortunately, wala po akong access, kaya hindi ko po masabi. Pero siguro makakasiguro tayo, medyo malaki po yan. Because ang dami niyan eh. Yung mga vloggers, madami yung mga online ang ginagawa na kumikita. So lalo na yung mga troll armies, nako, ang laki ng binabayad diyan kasi sa Russia nung di ba the accusation was in the Trump campaign, marami daw palang Russian intervention sa campaign during the US presidential campaign that brought President Trump into power. So dun lang merong mga anecdotes na i-report noon na so many dollars per troll ang kanilang binabayad. So all I can say is it's likely to be very large, but to be able to get a handle on the amount, we will have to ask the experts, especially those tracking the online economy, so to speak.
Okay, maraming salamat po, sir. So next question po dito ay nakalagay, what are your concerns about borrowings, foreign and local by government?
Well, as of now, yung pong ating pag-utang, hindi naman nalalayo sa pag-utang ng ibang bansa. Kasi sa totoo lang, lahat ng bansa napilitang umutang ng malakihan, including developed and rich countries like the United States. No? Ang sitwasyon natin maganda relatively dahil because of the good economic management of past administrations, umabot po tayo sa lugar bago nagpandemya na yung ating debt to GDP ratio, yung ratio ng ating pagkakautang sa total GDP natin per year, nasa less than 40% na lang po. Nanggaling po tayo sa 75% at its peak, no, in the early 2000s. Kaya nga po napilitan na taasan yung VAT natin noong 2008 from 10% naging 12% para mawala yung crisis na yon na napakalaki ng ating pagkakautang. So long story short, by 2019 and early 2020, the debt to GDP ratio was very manageable. In other words, medyo magaan po yung debt burden natin when we entered the pandemic. Kaya lang, itong pumasok ang pandemya, dahil umutang tayo ng malaki para nga sa vaccination, para sa general expenses ng gobyerno, it's already going up close to 60% again, according to the government. And 60% po yung kinukonsider na medyo threshold na pag lumampas doon, medyo kailangan mag-ingat na. So we are getting to that point again. Pero so far, yung mga hiniram po natin in the past year, we do not see that to be a major threat. What will be a major threat is if we keep borrowing more in the years ahead or in the year ahead even, so that baka tayo bumalik to sa 75% na pinanggalingan natin in the early 2000s. Medyo mahirap po yun. Kasi ibig sabihin talagang kailangan magtaas na naman ng buwis para lang mabayaran yung ating utang. So yun ang hindi sana natin dapat makita. But right now, it remains manageable, but our finance authorities, starting with Secretary Sani Dominguez, they're monitoring it very, very carefully. Kaya nga po nakikriticize sila na parang medyo nangunguripot na sila ngayon sa mga ayuda. Dahil takot na nga sila, tumataas na yung level ng utang natin.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. So another question po, sir, dito. Sir, based on the 6% presidentiables, you have shown in your PowerPoint, personally, for you, who do you think among the 6 could bring hope to the 110 million Filipinos in terms of economy?
Well, wag na po dito. Pero ang ginawa ko po, itong aking column sa Inquirer for the last 2 weeks, I'm talking about what are the qualities we need to look for in our president. And itong article ko last Tuesday, pakitingnan niyo po yung aking no free lunch column sa article, sa Inquirer. Meron akong sinabing 7 C's of good leadership. No? Kung maalala kong lahat, no? Character is number 1. Number 2 is competence. Importante rin po yan. Hindi natin maaaring sabihin na hindi na bali yung competence. Marami namang advisors na pwede magbigay. Kaya lang in the end, ang magde-decide pa rin sa maraming iba-ibang advice, siya pa rin eh. Kaya kailangan nandun yung character niya, na tama ang kanyang basihan kung ano yung pipiliin niya sa mga advice. So competence, again, character, competence, and then nandyan yung consistency, na dapat hindi pa bago-bago ang desisyon, na flip-flopping, you know? And that's why kailangan dyan ng political will. Kasi pag naging unpopular na isang desisyon, hindi dapat babaguhin kasi dahil lang sa medyo political forces are going otherwise. And that means the fourth C is courage. Na panindigan ang kanyang mga ginagawa at mga desisyon na tama. No? And then there's also the factor of ano nga pang sabi ko? Well, one important thing is charisma. Yung panghuli ko yung charisma. Pero hindi ganun ka-importante yan. Pero charisma is very important kasi sa winnability nga, kailangan daw may charisma para magustuhan ng tao. Pero importante rin yung charisma because we have to have a leader that inspires our people to work together. So isang sipa nga pala na nalampasan ko is yung consistency at yung cohesiveness pala. A unifying leader who can really bridge the divides, especially the political divides among our people. Sana nga wala na yung mga kulay-kulay na yan. It only makes us more divided. May pink, may green, may dilaw. Naging basihan pa yan ng pag-aaway, yung mga dilawan ang tawag. Parang na-demonize tuloy yung dilaw. No? Hindi magtatagal, made-demonize na rin yung pink na yan. No? Sa
purple.
Sa loob-loob ko nga, alam niyo ang pinakamagandang kulay? Puti. Hindi naman dahil si Isko ang puti. Pero kaya puti, alam niyo po na marami sa atin nakakaalam, ang puti, kombinasyon ng lahat ng kulay. Pag nilagay niyo lahat ng kulay, puti ang lalabas. And the reason for that is if you unify all political colors, then we get white. No? And that is really the leadership we need. Somebody who can unify all the political colors. Of course, it's impossible to make sure everybody fully agrees with one another. Pero we have to have a bridging leadership. So yun lang po masasabi ko. No? Sukatin po natin sa isip natin, sino sa mga kandidato ang tingin nating pinaka-capable. Meron ng character, meron ng competence, meron ng consistency and courage and cohesiveness and charisma. Hindi ko na po sasabihin kung sino yung pipiliin ko.
Thank you very much, sir. Well said. And we have another question here. Until recently, we are faced with power
outages,
and also internet downtime. Were this considered in your forecast?
Well, to be honest, the forecast really simply takes account of the trends, no? So as of now, ang ibig sabihin nun, yung forecast natin is based on the premise na yung ating power availability compared to need is the same as what it has been in the last 2-3 years or so. Ngayon, ito nga po ang malaking hamon. Habang bumabangon na ekonomiya natin, tataas na naman yung pangangailangan sa power. And the reality is, in the past year, there are at least 2 times na nagka-red alert tayo na yung available power was already less than what was needed plus the reserve that has to be in place. In short, kailangan na naman ang karagdagang power plant, power generation capacity. And one would hope that more of it will be of the less fossil fuel powered power plants, no? Less coal, but more of the shall we say, more environment-friendly technologies like hydropower, geothermal, and of course, renewable energies. Pero yun na nga po ang problema natin. Kailangan nga natin pag-ibayuhin ulit ang pag-invest into power generation. Meanwhile, yung forecast po natin is basically based on the trends that we were seeing in recent years.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. So another question po, why is the government not supporting the local agri-sectors? Why they buy imported vegetables, pork, fish, etc.?
Well, unang-una, pag nag-import tayo, sabihin talagang kulang ang domestic production. Although, the other reason precisely why this is happening, historical po ito eh. Alam naman natin na karamihan ng mga agricultural products mas mahal dito sa ating domestic economy compared to overseas. Kaya napaka-tempting, malaki ang tukso na mag-import kahit na bawal minsan, no? Dahil ang laki ng kikitain ng mga mag-i-import. So karamihan dyan, smuggled talaga yan. No? Ngayon, ang problema po kasi, all these past years, masyado nating ginamit na polisiya yung pagsasara ng ating merkado sa agricultural products to the point na nawala po yung incentive ng gobyerno natin na pagbutihin yung suporta sa magsasaka natin to be more productive and therefore have lower cost of production, which will be more comparable to what it costs to produce the same products abroad. Ang number one example na nga dyan po is bigas na naging 2 to 3 times more expensive in the Philippines. Dahil nga po, sinarhan natin, pwede lang mag-import NFA. As pag nag-import na mga nakaraang taon, mali pa ang timing. Kung kailan anihan na at saka papasok yung palay, lalong kawawa yung mga farmers natin. So we left it to one single government agency to decide. Samantalang it's the market that can actually look at the situation, supply and demand situation. In short, yung pong ating agricultural policy ang nagresulta sa masyadong mahal na agricultural products. Kaya hindi po tayo maka-export eh. Mahal ang cost of production natin. Paano tayo makakalaban sa Thailand, sa Vietnam, who can produce their agricultural products more cheaply? So that is the reason why economists like me have long been saying, sana ang ating policy mas bukas, hindi yung sinarhan natin, akala natin, sapat na tulong na sa magsasaka natin, nasarhan natin yung merkado natin. Ang naging resulta, tumaas naman ang presyo. Kasi hindi binigyan ng additional support naman para mapababa nila ang cost of production. Kasi kampante na yung ating mga taga-DA siguro noon, hindi ba hindi naman, okay lang naman kasi mataas naman ang presyo na makukuha dahil sinarhan natin yung hindi pwede sila makipag-compete sa mga imported. Kung maraming natatakot, every time nag-i-import tayo dahil nga, obviously, mas mura yung import. Kailangan na po natin baguhin yan, yung traditional policy natin yan. Unti-unti natin buksan. Ang isang analogy ko dyan, hindi po matututong maglangoy yung bata hanggat hindi natin itapon sa tubig. Hindi matututong magbisikleta isang bata hanggat hindi natin inaalis yung training wheels sa bisikleta. O hindi matututong maglangoy kung hindi natin aalisin yung salbabida niya. So this is the kind of thing that has been stunting our agricultural sector all these years. So we have to do that, but obviously kailangan pag-ibayuhin natin yung suporta talaga sa magsasaka para mag-improve ang productivity nila. So yan po ang dahilan kung ba't mayroong ganyang importasyon. No? Lalo ngayon, nung nagkaroon ng baboy na problema sa shortage ng baboy, maraming nagalit kasi ba't daw tayo ay nag-i-import ngayon ng maraming baboy. Ayun po ang paraan para mapababa natin yung presyo kasi biruan nyo, 1/3 ng baboy natin nawala. No? Kawawa naman yung mga consumers natin, lalo na yung mahihirap na hindi makabili ng karne dahil naging 400 piso na isang kilo samantalang 200 to 250 lang dati. So mga ganyang klaseng sitwasyon, balancing act po talaga yan eh. So in short, it is the failure of our government over the past years has been to give genuine support and assistance to our farmers. They thought it was enough to close the market. And then, sige, pwede naman kayong mas mataas ang cost of production nyo kasi wala naman makakakompete sa inyo na imported eh. And yet, of course, nakakapasok yung mga smuggler. So that's why, yung ganyang problema, talagang tumagal ng maraming taon.
Okay, thank you, sir. Ito na po ang ating last question. So how does one get government support to start a micro-enterprise? Are household initiatives to sell goods considered under this category?
Well, alam niyo po ang talagang malungkot na katotohanan, mga micro-enterprises, mahirap makakuha ng financial support lalong-lalo na. Sapagkat ako po naranasan namin yan. Ito, not even a micro-enterprise, pero meron po akong mga kaklase dati sa high school, ng Philippine Science High School classmates ko. Nung po nagkaroon ng African swine fever, we decided let's pay back to society. Let us get into a business of African swine fever testing. So nag-chemical testing lab kami dito sa Calamba, sa Laguna. Naku po, napakahirap palang i-access yung mga financial program ng gobyerno at lalo na sa bangko. Kasi unang-una, kung wala kang track record na 2 taon nasa negosyo ka na, hindi ka pwedeng umutang at all. So yun po ang mahirap na sitwasyon. In short, mukhang ang pwede lang puntahan ng micro-enterprises and mismo yung mga microfinance institutions. Yung mga ahon sa hirap, yung mga card, yung mga nagbibigay po ng pautang sa mga micro-enterprises using the microfinance type of model. Pero pag pumunta kayo sa bangko, hindi kayo aabot ng first base. So, kahit na yung mga lending program ng gobyerno, hindi rin kayo aabot ng first base kasi hihingan muna kayo ng track record. Kailangan nagnegosyo na kayo ng 2 taon bago kayo pakinggan. So we simply have to look to our microfinance sector. Maganda naman pong balita doon, lumalago at maganda ang performance ng ating microfinance sector. Doon po tayo tumingin kung tayo po ay maliit na negosyo.
Okay. So again, maraming salamat, Professor Habito, for that wonderful sharing and answers to our questions here. So for those who have written down their questions, we apologize that we can no longer accommodate them due to time constraints. Okay, so once again, Professor Habito, maraming salamat sa lahat ng mga inputs mo na binigay niyo sa amin. Sana lahat yun ay makakatulong sa amin, sa aming mga respective organizations.